Mabuhay, Kamusika, welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. This is maybe the fourth live stream that I am doing. And normally, although I do talk about the life of me and my Filipina, I try not to keep it too personal, but be very specific about practical things you can do to be a good husband with your Filipina. And this topic here about having children in an age gap marriage is something that I want to talk about for a couple reasons. And one is that it does pertain to foreigners and Filipinas because a lot of foreigners are on the older side. I'm 57 now as of today. And often they're seeking a woman from another country that is younger, perhaps somebody in their 20s. And if that woman hasn't had children, there's a good chance she's going to want to have children. Also, this seems to be a topic that would fit into the age category of quite a few of my viewers, which should be about 35 to 44. So age gap marriage, should they have children? Should an older foreigner have a baby with a younger Filipina? Normally, this wouldn't be a question that concerns me, but since I married a younger Filipina 3 years and 5 months ago, I am dealing with this issue. In this live stream, I intend to outline my opinion on our situation, and my wife and I are on the same page with this, and we've had some serious discussions about it. These will just be, my thoughts. I hope you can take away from it what you can take away from it. If you've been in this situation, feel free to leave comments because I want to have something that's in depth about this topic. And I don't know how many live streams have been done with that, but I think it's a topic that would be helpful to foreigners and Filipinas. One reason that I decided to do a video, again, was it relates to so many people that I think would find my channel interesting. An age gap is normal. It's often desired. And this younger woman that you're interested in, maybe she already has children. If not, almost a 100% chance that she wants one. And that's actually a good thing, I think. In America, it seems to me that having a baby isn't as important as it once was. And being a mother is seen as an obstacle to pursuing some goal. I may have to be clicking away some distracting ads here. I find that to be unnatural and potentially unfulfilling for the woman who has no interest in being a mother, if she has potential to be a mother. I'm glad that my wife thinks that having a baby is a good thing. I've said to her that wanting to have a baby is one thing, but that baby isn't going to be one for long. If we decide to pursue having a baby, we must know that we are deciding to raise an adult in all actuality, and we have to be on the same page with regard to what we teach them and how. This might be the most difficult decision I have to make for the rest of my life. Just today, I turned 57. I say most difficult decision I have to make because my wife wants to have a baby. She is still 29. Because a marriage involves the merging of two lives together, there needs to be some give and take, to ensure harmony in the relationship. My wife says she's content to not have a baby, yet she would still like to have one. We're going to look at some risks for a pregnancy between an older man and a younger woman. Or I should say, when the man is older and the woman is younger, look at those separate risk factors. I don't want to bury my head in the sand. We need to face the current data head on. That doesn't mean that the current data is perfect or it's going to be that way with everyone, but I think we should run through some statistics. The thing is, there's no guarantee that we will have complications, but there are some considerations. I don't want to dash my wife's hopes. I realize that she was an answer to long prayer for a wife. I was not praying for a younger woman, a woman of childbearing age. I admit to wanting a woman who could help me make up for lost time, as I hadn't had a relationship in 30 years. No need to rewind that if you're watching later. I did say 30 years. So I realized she left all her family and friends to be my wife in America, not knowing when she will see them again. She did this after marrying me in only 54 days. 55 days before we got married, neither one of us knew the other person existed. She didn't know what kind of man I would be exactly. Both of us were trusting each other and trusting God, and she has been a great wife. My wife knows I would prefer not to be a father. My reasons, maybe I am too old to be one. I've had that thought, and we'll talk about that. It will be expensive. We'll talk about that a little. I don't want to be irresponsible and presumptuous, and we'll cover that. I don't want to give her a baby with Down syndrome or schizophrenia or autism, which can happen when the father or the man is older. I don't want her to end up taking care of me and the child at the same time. I do admit to not having wanted to be a father really ever before. Some guys can't wait to have several children, but that would not aptly describe me. On top of these issues, I'm selfish as anyone. I want to get my thoughts on paper and talk about them so I can come to a decision, and perhaps others can learn something from this. And that's what I've been doing. Before even reaching the point of being married to a younger wife, it's important to talk about whether or not you will be producing a baby or attempting to. I, excuse me, the cough is coming back. I'm sure this would be a deal breaker to some, resulting in there not even being a marriage. Each situation has its own unique elements, and I welcome anyone to share a comment about this issue, what your experience has been, and feel free to ask me to comment on something relating to this topic that you're curious about. Many of my viewers, again, are between 35 and 44, although I know I've got some women who are subscribers, but it seems like the vast majority, according to the YouTube analytics, are between 35 and 44 and men. So I'm hoping this topic is of interest to you. The ages of the couple do matter. I'm 57, my wife's 29, and I don't think it would be fair to my wife or even responsible if I would be 60 or 65 to still be trying to give her a baby. I at least want to be statistically possible for me to have some quality time with the child. Let's get rid of that. And later I'm going to define what I mean by quality time. If my wife was closer to 40 than the 29 that she is now, again, I would think a lot differently about that situation simply because of the increased likelihood of health issues for her. The bottom line is we both want to do the right thing. Again, everyone's circumstances are unique. I love my wife very much and told her I want to make her dreams come true. I want to be used by God to give her the best life possible. And I want to give this the best effort that I can. I don't want to say, hon, okay, we'll try to have a baby. And I support you 90%. I have to support her 100%. And I'm willing to, take on some risk to my health. Last week, I had blood pressure readings of 174 and 176. I think earlier this week it was 172 over 102. Why that is, I don't know. It's been high all year, but not that high. It's been in the 150s. But maybe it's the fertility med that we'll talk about later, but something's going on with that. And my blood is kind of thick too. We're taking that out of my body every 2 or 3 weeks, which is just too often right now. But what am I going to do? Pregnancy after 35. What are the risks? And this is from an author named Hannah Nichols, probably in something called Maternity News Today. I didn't get any more of that, uh, person information than that. I probably should have. So risks if the woman is 35 and older would include a decline in fertility. So the sooner we can try to conceive, the better. Women are born with all the eggs that they will ever have. As females age, the likelihood that they will get pregnant reduces due to the declining number of remaining eggs and their reduced quality. Now, I'm really naive about this stuff. I didn't really know anything at all about it until I started doing some research here within the last week. So this is kind of fascinating to me. One study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that among women who received artificial insemination, 74% of those under 31 years old were pregnant within a year. However, this decreased from 74 to 61% of individuals between the ages of 31 to 34, so just 3 more years. And it further declined to 54% of women aged 35 and over. There are genetic risks. Genetic risks present more often in pregnancy as women age. For example, the rate of having a baby with Down syndrome accelerates with maternal age, while the rate of an embryo having Down syndrome at the 10-week mark of pregnancy is 1 in 1,064 at age 25. This rises to 1 in 686 at age 30, 1 in 240 by the age of 35. At the age of 40, the Down syndrome rate increases still to 1 in 53 and down to 1 in 19 embryos at the age of 45. Miscarriage. The risk of miscarriage climbs gradually with the mother's age. Research published in the BMJ showed that risk of miscarriage is around 8.9% for women aged 20 to 24 years, but increases to 74.7% for individuals age 45 or above. The declining quality of women's eggs is thought to be responsible for the higher rates of miscarriage. Then there is stillbirth. Stillbirth is more likely to occur in older women than a younger woman. A systematic review published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal found that stillbirth is around 1.2 to 2.23 times higher in older women. Now, my wife is 29, almost 30. So, each year she gets older, according to the research, there's a little bit greater chance that, something could happen that we don't want to have happen. Another study examining data from 385,120 pregnancies in the United Kingdom observed that the rate of stillbirth was 4.7 per 1,000 women aged 18 to 34, rose to 6.1 per 1,000 between the ages of 35 and 40, and 8.1 per 1,000 aged 40 and older. Furthermore, the stillbirth rate has been shown to be higher in people having their first child and even higher in first-time moms aged 35 or older. The reasons that stillbirth rates increase with maternal age are currently unclear, and there are other risks. Research comparing pregnancy complications among women aged 18 to 34, 35 to 40, and 40 and over found small increase in most pregnancy and birth-related complications with age. The researchers identified increases in the risk of gestational diabetes, placenta previa, breech positioning of the baby, emergency cesarean delivery, postpartum hemorrhage, preterm birth, low birth weight, high birth weight. Other research has found that risk of maternal mortality also increases with age, and these are important things to be aware of. Research presented at the American Stroke Association's internal stroke conference just a couple of years ago revealed that compared with women who go through pregnancy at a younger age, pregnant women age 40 and older are at a greater risk of ischemic stroke, hemorrhagic stroke, heart attack, and death from cardiovascular disease. We already knew that older women were more likely than younger women to experience health problems during their pregnancy, said Dr. Adnan I. Qureshi, the director of an institute in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Now we know that the consequences of that later pregnancy stretch years into the future. And he and colleagues found that all the risks except for hemorrhagic stroke were explained by well-known risk factors for cardiovascular disease, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol that older pregnant women face. Now, in the article is also this comment. Our findings suggest that women should not be concerned about their age per se when considering to have a child. Says another expert, it seems that individual life circumstances and behavioral choices are more important than age. So that's a good thing. Now, that seems like a bit of a contradiction, unless their point is that if an older woman is healthy and continues to lead a healthy lifestyle and remains relatively stress-free and happy, then her age is not as much of a threat to having a healthy outcome. My wife is healthy, has a good weight of 92 pounds, and seems happy. I joke with other women sometimes that my wife's best weight would be 76, just to see what they say or what kind of facial expression they make. This is one of the reasons I would tend to want to try for a baby with her. And there are others. I don't want to still be trying when she is getting to be 35 or above because of these reproductive concerns, because I will be even older and more statistically likely to have bad sperm, causing some problems. But what about paternal age? How does that affect a baby's health? That hits home a little more. Studies suggest, this is from someone named Eric P. Castle, and studies suggest that a father's age at the time of conception, paternal age, might pose health risks for a baby. However, this field of research is still relatively small, and results have been mixed, and more research is needed. Studies have shown that when paternal age is over 40, which would be probably most of the men who are foreigners seeking a Filipina, then there might be a small increase in the risk of adverse pregnancy outcome or risks to children's health, including pregnancy loss. Advanced paternal age might be associated with a slightly higher risk of pregnancy loss before week 20 of pregnancy, a miscarriage or a stillbirth, rare birth defects. Older paternal age might slightly increase the risk of certain rare birth defects, including defects in the development of the skull, limbs, and heart. Autism. Research shows a link between older paternal age and an increased frequency of autism spectrum disorder. And then there's schizophrenia. Studies suggest an older paternal age might increase the risk of the severe mental disorder schizophrenia and might be associated with earlier onset of schizophrenia symptoms. Childhood acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Older paternal age might be associated with a slightly increased risk of childhood acute lymphoblastic leukemia, a cancer that results in abnormal white blood cell production. Researchers believe the increased risk of health conditions might be due to random genetic mutations in sperm that occur more commonly in older men than in younger men. Despite the increase in these risks, however, the overall risk remains small and less certain than those associated with maternal age over 40, at least as far as this research is concerned. It says here, if you're older than 40 and you're considering have a baby, or you're concerned about your reproductive health, consult your doctor. And this next article here is more than a little scary. It's called Devastating Health Risks Older Fathers May Pass to Children. This is from dailymall.co UK. Women have long been warned that the older they are, the greater the risk of health problems for them and their baby, but research now suggests older fathers can also affect a baby's health. This increases the risk of epilepsy, autism, and breast cancer. 2/3 of new UK fathers are now over 30, and the researchers say older would-be fathers should be better informed about the risks of conditions that can occur in their offspring. Whereas menopause marks the end of reproduction, men are able to produce sperm throughout their lives. However, the quality declines, and according to the new research from doctors at the Center for Reproductive Medicine, Baylor College of Medicine in Texas, and other centers, this could have implications for the next generation. Worldwide data from more than 60 teams of researchers on the health risks associated with older fathers found that men aged over 35 had a 50% lower chance of conceiving over a 12-month period than men 25 and under, even after taking into account the age of the would-be mother. The risk of miscarriage and premature birth also rises when the man is more than 40. I'm 57. Wow. A study of 23,821 pregnant women analyzed by the researchers found that pregnancies involving men aged 50 or above were twice as likely to end in the loss of the fetus compared to younger fathers. And the problems may not end with conception. Advanced paternal age, considered over 40, increases the risk of breast cancer in their daughters by around 60%, according to one of the studies the American researchers looked at. 1 of 5 to find a link between advanced paternal age and breast cancer. Children conceived by fathers over 40 also have a 30% increased risk of epilepsy, a 37% higher risk of Down syndrome, a 14% greater chance of childhood leukemia, and a 70% greater likelihood of central nervous system cancers, such as brain tumors. If the father is over 45, there is a 3-fold increased risk of retinoblastoma, a rare type of eye cancer. Older fathers are thought to be at higher risk of having children with autism and schizophrenia once again. Some of the biggest increases in risk are seen in genetic disorders. Achondroplasia, a common cause of dwarfism, is nearly 8 times more prevalent in the children of fathers aged 50 and over. So why might this be? In order to produce new sperm, so-called sperm precursor cells have to divide. They do this every 16 days, which means by the time a man reaches 70, these cells have divided around 1,500 times. With each division comes a risk of DNA mutation and genetic defects. A study from Iceland in 2012 found that the average child born to a 20-year-old father has 25 DNA mutations in their genes, and that the number increases annually, reaching 65 mutations for offspring of 40-year-old men, increasing the risk of problems. Another explanation is that After the age of 60, a high percentage of sperm is affected by so-called DNA fragmentation. Normally, the genetic material in a sperm cell is wound up like a tight ball of yarn to prevent the strands of DNA from breaking. When the genetic material is not safely packaged, the DNA strands are vulnerable to breakage or DNA fragmentation, which means the fertilized egg may not be able to develop normally, and in some cases become unviable. With age, a man's testosterone levels also drop, with 1 in 5 men over 60 having low levels, leading to poor semen quality, which can affect conception rates. Now, I should note that taking exogenous testosterone from outside your body, like injecting it or a cream, might give you more semen volume and higher testosterone, but it is going to make you sterile in the process. So that's not a solution, not if you want fertility. Advanced maternal age can also lead to birth defects, say the Baylor researchers. Dr. Simon Fischel says even though men keep producing sperm, the decline in sperm DNA with age is now uncontroversial, with potentially devastating effects on the offspring of older men. It is not as marked or obvious an effect that we observe in women, which makes it all the more insidious and risky for populations in which men are reproducing later in life. This study is telling us we need to sit up and take note and start to educate the public on the risks of the male biological clock and not just the female. Yet currently, patients are rarely warned about how advanced maternal age may present risks to their offspring, but this should change, says Dr. Dolores Lamb, director of the Center for Reproductive Medicine and professor of urology and molecular and cellular biology at Baylor College of Medicine. The medical community, she says, must do a better job of educating couples that there are some risks associated with conception at advanced paternal age. Now, I would say that we've been meeting with a fertility expert, the only one in the state, as far as I know, and we have not been talked to about any risks. No other doctors have volunteered any information to us about that either. Now, one issue will be identifying the age at which problems may occur. One study the researchers looked at, which set out to find a cutoff age for men, found that semen quality declined continuously with age, with no point at which risk suddenly increased. There have been some late age births in the Bible, though, speaking about older paternal age. For example, Genesis 17:17, Abraham, it says here, fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah, his wife, bear a child at the age of 90? And this is, by the way, the only mention of a marital age in the Bible. Abraham 100 and his wife Sarah 90. Romans 4:19, he did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb. So although he thought it was preposterous at first, he had the faith to believe that God could do it. And then in Genesis 21:5, we read, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. In Luke 1, tells of the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth having a baby in advanced years. We don't know their ages at the time, but even if it was only 60 or 70, that would still be remarkable. Ruth 4:13, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. As far as I know, all of these pregnancies, resulted in healthy children, and these pregnancies themselves were perfectly normal. Now, God certainly had to circumvent something in the normal birth process, but there isn't any reason to believe that it wasn't a normal man's sperm and a normal woman's eggs and uterus. These are extreme but true examples that the ages of both the couples don't have to mean there will be birth defects. So researchers say there's definitely an increased chance of that if you get to be 30 and 35 and 40, and I'm 57. And as we continue here, we'll go into the reasons why we're going to go ahead and try for it nonetheless. And one of those is that God's will is typically that a married couple bear children, and this is noted in Genesis 1:28, where it says, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." Now, what I have to decide is if it is not too late for that, and if so, based on what. I admit that I feel I'm getting close to the point that pursuing having a baby with my wife would be irresponsible for both of us. And that is because of the role that I, as a father, would need to have in this child's life. If I'm going to die in a few years, let's say we try to have a child when I'm 65 or something, I would not be able to get much accomplished in their life. Of course, any husband could die at any time after become a father, but that's completely out of our control. I need to be sure I am considering the things I can control. Whether or not God closes my wife's womb is one thing, but whether I decide to avoid a pregnancy is another matter. And I will also briefly touch on this also. Being fruitful and multiplying is something I've talked about with my pastor for at least the last 3 years. He thought 3 years ago when we tried to have a baby the first time, and I was infertile then too. And when I brought it up somewhat recently, he still felt the same way as I do. He thinks that we only have a narrow window yet to do so without being irresponsible. I can't be legalistic about the things I'm presenting tonight, as each couple needs to make the best decision that they can together. It's possible they might come to a different conclusion than we did. Feel free to comment on the process you may have gone through in your mind, perhaps agonized over regarding having children when one or both of you were older. Now, quality time. This is important. Quality time is, as far as I know, not knowing how long I'm going to live, quality time is still possible. Proverbs 22, verse 6, very popular, well-known, and often misunderstood verse, says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now, my understanding of this verse is that the word old is not talking about an old man, but rather the age when a young man would begin to grow facial hair, which would be, about an adolescent. It would be, the old would be describing an adolescent. This matters to me because at 57 today, and still not having a child, of course, I understand there's limited time I would be able to influence this child. And that is what I mean by quality time, providing all the influence I can as a father to prepare this child for adulthood, the time of life when they will be hit with every kind of temptation and everything they believe is attacked by society as nonsense. What I mean by that is, I want my child brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, like it says in Ephesians 6:4. Do you remember when you first encountered a different philosophy of life growing up? If you're a Christian somewhere around high school, maybe even earlier, the philosophy around you became more liberal. Parental authority was about to be challenged. The phrase, "in the way he should go," according to many scholars, can be read according to his own way or bent. In other words, while we should bring them up to know right from wrong and good from better, absolutely, we also need to bring them up according to the way God made them. Not one size fits all. Careful attention would need to be paid to tendencies and ways particular to each child, not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, not trying to sway or pressure them to become something or pursue something that really is not natural to them or befitting them. If they have a certain temperament, not trying to change it when it may be best to be patient and see how they develop. God makes us unique. It has been said, you are the best you in the world. If a parent tries to alter the direction God may want that child to go, that is a great disservice to the child. I knew a kid growing up that was certainly not athletic, but appeared his athletic father was trying to force him to buy into those kinds of endeavors. And that is foolish when that is not according to his bent or own way. There's much more that could be said about this, but I hope I'm at least giving you the general idea. Well, what I'm explaining here is that quality time to me is in those formative years, well before college. My position is that if I can have enough time to train and develop them to at least the adolescent years, I will have done the brunt of the work that needs to be done. I would have, along with my wife, installed what they needed to know to enter adulthood, which some think children are forced to enter earlier and earlier. What with television and the internet, these earlier years are when they need to be prepared for the rest of their life. If that is done, the general principle of Proverbs 22:6 is that they will hold on to this. They will remember it and practice it the rest of their lives into old age. Now, Jesus was 12. This is mentioned in Luke 2:39 through 52, and that may be significant as an age when a child should be prepared to begin to enter the adult world. Now, something I heard a long time ago that I found on the internet here that sums up, my understanding of this verse was from Pastor Adrian Rogers, taken from something he spoke or wrote called "How to Train Up a Child." And he's saying, taking a look at Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. He says, now look up here at me. Let me tell you something. He says, Norman Evans did not learn how to play football by reading books about football, nor even by watching football games on Sunday, whoever that player was. So how did he learn to play football? He was trained to play football. This verse does not say, teach a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it. There is a difference between teaching and training, and many parents do not know that difference, and therefore they are losing their children. And then they mentioned someone that learned how to sing, um, did not learn how to sing by listening to music alone, nor by reading books about music. They had a trained voice, and Norman Evans was a trained athlete. Your responsibility is to train your child. Now you teach them the way that they shall go, and somebody else can come along and teach them another way, and they might go the other way. But the Bible says that when you train a child in the way that he should go, when he's old, he will not depart from it. And here's the key. That doesn't mean he's going to get to be a grown man and then come back. The word when he is old literally has the idea of hair on the chin, a little peach fuzz. That is, when he reaches the age when many teenagers go astray, he will stray if he's not taught properly, or she will stray. Train a child, drill that child, and when that child reaches puberty, maturity, they will keep on loving God. So it's not saying train them up in the right way, and they may go their, they may, I don't know, backslide or live an immoral life until they're 60 or 70 and then turn. That's often what that verse is said to mean, but I believe it's saying something else. Train them up according to their own bent, teach them right and wrong, get that all instilled before their adolescence. Then you have a really good chance that they are not going to depart from it. So if I could give them, say, 13 years of my life, this child that we don't have yet, to train them in the Word of God and to know truth and to follow God, then if my wife had a baby next year, I would be about 71 at that 13-year mark. That might be enough for my conscience to know I had time to invest in that child in the most important stage of its life. I believe the major groundwork to a child's life must be before high school age. They must be prepared to deal with their hormones and all the temptation that will be around them. The child's worldview will also be under attack more and more at around that age. That is why when someone says that it's a horrendous irresponsibility on my part if I die when the child is an adolescent because I didn't get to live a long time with them, then I disagree with them. It would be a disaster if I didn't pour as much knowledge and wisdom into them during those early years. I have my health concerns. Can I make it to 71? Only God knows. An objection I have heard is your wife will end up taking care of you and the child someday. Well, I suppose that is a possibility, but one that my wife will need to accept could happen, I suppose, if we have a baby. Maybe a Filipina is less likely to be concerned about this. I don't know. Naturally, no one knows the future. There are men who have ended up having unexpected health issues requiring their wife's aid much earlier than expected. It is a difficult enough decision to make, and it is easy to worry that we are making the wrong decision and even being irresponsible and presumptuous of God. That is to say, we really shouldn't have tried to have a baby. Now we end up hoping God bails us out of the situation. So we want to be as sure as we can that God doesn't think that we are being foolish. Remember the biblical command to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. We can acknowledge with certainty that if we are trying to be obedient to that while we still can, that God will not think we are being foolish. If I am intent on raising this child according to the Bible, I am not being foolish. Another thing to toss into the mix of considerations is God's role in the birth of any human being. It is crucial for my wife and I to realize that it is God who controls or determines whether birth will actually take place. This comes from the fact that the Bible says that it is God who opens the womb and God who closes the womb. He allows for pregnancy and he prevents it. This is or should be a comfort to us. Some will say that if a normal man and normal woman have sex without birth control, there is going to be a pregnancy. But that's just certainly not true. Let's confine this to marriage so there's no misunderstanding that I'm somehow supporting premarital sex, which I don't. There are many cases of couples trying to get pregnant, but they just can't. Have you ever heard of couples who tried as hard as they could to have a baby, gave up, adopted a baby, and then she became pregnant? Yeah, that happens. We don't know the rhyme or reason for why one woman gets pregnant and another doesn't, or why it takes so long for some. There are times when no impediments are observed, but no pregnancy occurs. Men and women cooperate in the birth process, but it is still under God's oversight if it happens. Am I saying that if a seemingly unwanted pregnancy occurs, that God could have prevented it, but chose not to? Yes. King David committed adultery with Uriah the Hittite's wife Bathsheba, then committed a mass murder to cover it up. One could reason that this was one where God maybe should have prevented conception or allowed for a miscarriage, but as you will see later, God is in control of the birth process always. Um, you know, am I suggesting a couple could beg God for a child and not receive one? Well, there's probably been some people who have said that's what happened to them. All I know is whether or not a pregnancy occurs is God's decision. He doesn't want us to seek his will, and if we think that is to have children, and we are able with no reason to believe it will endanger the life of the woman, that does not guarantee he will allow a pregnancy. Many couples have adopted children so they can have the family they believe God wants them to have. This is a good time to mention that we are not exploring the option of adoption. That is another major decision that some have to make. As we process through this, at this time we know that I have been infertile, and later I will tell you what I'm trying to do about it and if there have been any positive signs. And when I say infertile, I mean zero, zip, zilch, nada, no sperm to work with. All women are barren until God opens their womb. My wife and I believe we should try to have a baby. We believe that's what God wants us to do. We should also believe that God will bless us in wanting to be obedient to Him, even if He chooses to not allow a birth. I just want to comment briefly on birth control. Does that mean that a married couple should never use birth control? And that's one of those things that the Bible doesn't come right out and address specifically. We know God says, be fruitful and multiply. We know He ultimately decides that that will happen. If we already have been faithful to be fruitful and multiply, it would seem difficult to prove they're doing something wrong by using birth control if they're thinking they don't think bringing another child into the world is a good idea. They've already done that. In our case, we have not reached the point we can say that we have given it our best shot to have a child yet. Getting into my story, this concept of God's involvement in the birth process is especially important to me because, as I said, I've been infertile, 57 years old today. Now, before we look at God's responsibility in the birth process, I want to get you up to speed with the state of affairs. I did not know I was infertile when I married my wife. I had never done a sperm test, and I was on a med that, I think caused the infertility, but I wasn't expecting to try to have children when I was 53 when we got married. When we got married, it was very quick, and I hadn't checked into fertility. I wasn't always anticipating or trying to marry a younger woman. That's just happened when I was, able to consider a Filipina. And when we got the humbling results back of zero sperm, 3 or so years ago, we chalked it up to medication. So, in an act of love for my wife, I decided to stop taking that medication for the purpose of trying to give her a baby. At that point, it was about 4.5 years ago. I went to the only male fertility expert in the state, tried 2 different fertility meds, and after a year and a half, had no sperm. But twice the sperm test showed 200,000 per mil, which is about 1/100th of what would be considered low normal. And also had another one which was like 100,000 per mil. But however, after both of those levels were achieved, the count dropped down to nothing. And the fertility doctor said he had never had a patient who started to make sperm, then stopped, like I did, dropping to 0. I wasn't feeling the best. And he said, well, we could stop trying if I wanted to. And I said, yes, let's do that. I kept my wife informed of all the blood tests and sperm tests and all that information. And she even met with the doctor. She knows I tried. And that was 3 years or so ago. And due to some threatening side effects of a med, or maybe some underlying undiagnosed condition, 5 months ago, I felt I had no choice but to go off that med again, only because of all the meds I was taking, that one might have been associated with some of my problems. That's just, again, they don't really know. That was just my guess. So having done that, I thought, well, maybe my wife and I could take another attempt at fertility, even though I was 3 years older. And there's every reason to believe that about 5 months ago, I was completely infertile still. But we have had a positive test. So I went back to this doctor, presented my case as to why I'm not a medical expert, but I do try to keep my eye on some things and my ears open. So I presented my case for maybe why we should try again, and he agreed with me. We're running out of time. We wanted to make one last attempt at this. So we went back to the same exact protocol as the first time. It didn't work, but there's only so many things you can try. This doctor, worked very hard to get a seldom used, expensive, but otherwise effective medication that I asked him to pursue. And he did 2 or 3 appeals. So I know he was invested in this, but we lost those appeals, so we weren't able to do that. And I wanted to do a sperm test sooner than later, but he didn't think there was any reason to do one before December of this year. So he wanted to wait about 3 months. And I asked for a doctor that I know to give me a sperm analysis earlier because I was anxious to see what there was. And I told my wife, since it takes 3 months for the newly made sperm to be ejaculated, that would be nearly a miracle for there to be any at all. Earlier, 3 years earlier, we had gone a year and a half with no results. So to start to make sperm a month after so of going off this med would almost be a miracle. And considering our first attempt went nowhere. So we got the test results. We went to the doctor together just a few weeks ago, maybe a month. And since I wasn't expecting to see anything, I admitted to looking at the sheet of paper quickly and missing something very important. What he told us was astounding. He said, you have 9 million sperm per mil, 9 million per mil. I told my wife that I would give it 2.5 years this time. And if there was nothing happening, then, I'd be about 59, and we should call off the dogs. So from nothing to 9 million was unbelievable for me. And I was numb on the drive home and for the rest of the day. There was something I had been doing differently in a frantic attempt to get fertile that I will disclose soon. But I want to continue showing texts that help make me more confident about my decision to try to give my wife a baby. And these really apply to the whole world. God closes the womb, Genesis 30, 1 and 2. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and she said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. That's the way they felt back then. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Genesis 20:18, for the Lord closed up the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. 1 Samuel 1, 5 and 6. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb. And it should be noted that God also opens the womb. Genesis 25:21. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Genesis 29:31. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb. But Rachel was barren. Genesis 30:22 through 24. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. In Deuteronomy 7:14, it says, you shall be blessed above all peoples. There shall not be a male or female barren among you or among your livestock. So yeah, even among livestock, and humans, God himself is in control of all of this. So far, I've explained that, one, we believe we should try to have a baby. Time seems to be running out as far as being responsible is concerned, but we believe it is not too late to be trying. Two, I believe that if I could live through 12, 13 years of this child's life, that would be the critical time period for us to invest ourselves into the rearing of this child. It wouldn't be necessary for me to live another 20 or 30 years after that. Third, we just looked at something that should take some pressure off of us, namely, if God wants a birth to result, he will make sure it does. And if his infinite wisdom chooses to deny that, it's his decision ultimately, and we should trust that. There's a fourth truth that I have a harder time accepting than my wife, and that is that children are a blessing. Psalm 127, 3 through 5. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who has his quiver full of them. And a quiver would be about 8 or 9 arrows. In this case, 8 or 9 children. What if God wants to bless me as a man by becoming a father? Whether I can see it or not, God calls children that he gives a blessing. There is lack of confidence, perhaps on my part, There are the financial concerns. The Bible says we're not to worry about that. Matthew 6 says that God knows what we need before we ask him. We're to be content with food and clothing. We're to live one day at a time, not knowing if that is all we are going to get to live. In general, we are not to worry about anything if we believe that God is our Father and we are his children. Attempting to have a child in our situation is not biblically foolish or unwise. Something else to believe is that God is in control. John Piper, and I'll have these links in the description, John Piper here mentions Ephesians 1:11. In him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his own will. Now, my take here is if we attempt to obey what we ascertain to be God's will, and it happens, that was God's will. If we attempt to obey what we ascertain to be God's will, and it doesn't happen, God doesn't allow it, we can rest in the fact that it was God's will also. And it may be that God wants us to give us a baby, so there will be one more soul in heaven. If we were to have a child, it would be good for my wife to have someone to help her later in life. Then again, if we didn't have a child, she would have many family members to help take care of her in her old age in the Philippines. It would be nice for my wife to have a visible, living, breathing reminder of our love story, however. And you can read that, part there that I have from John Piper. He mentions that God is over all. Proverbs 16:9, the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. General statement. Another one, Proverbs 20:24, a man's steps are from the Lord. How then can man understand his way? Proverbs 16:33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. He says human beings decide all kinds of ways to make a decision. They try rolling dice, and they draw lots, and they put out pieces of cloth on the ground. Whatever it is, the point here is that whatever means they use, it's going to be God's will in the end. Every decision is from the Lord. Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. So he says, whatever humans anywhere in the world are planning and doing, what stands is God's will. Now, my wife and I believe we should still try for a baby, but we'll be content if God does not allow that to happen. Jeremiah 10:23, I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not in man who walks to direct his steps. Piper mentions that God is the causer of all things. Amos 3, verse 6. Is a trumpet blown in a city and the people are not afraid? Does disaster come to a city unless the Lord has done it? He says the answer is no. Well, what's the implication? The implication is the biblical writer assumes every kind of event that comes to a city is ultimately from the Lord. He raises it with a rhetorical question that can't be explained any other way. That's his mindset. Lamentations 3:37. Who has spoken and it came to pass, unless the Lord has commanded it? In other words, the only explanation the biblical writer sees beyond anything being commanded is that the Lord ultimately brought it to pass. So I say if God commands a baby to be made, we will have a baby despite any odds. And then there's, James 4:13 through 15 says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such town and spend the year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, this is what the biblical inspired writer James says we ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. So we can say, if the Lord wills, we'll have a baby. What I'm showing here is that we have to decide, are we going to say, no, we're not going to have a baby? Is that because we don't trust God? Is that because we don't believe that children are a blessing? We have to work through all of these things. So in this last verse, Piper points out, what's the point of that? That means this or that. Anything you do, you should go into it saying, I'm not in control here. It's arrogant, he says, to think you're in control. God is in control. So again, ultimately, if the Lord wills, it will happen despite any odds. So he goes on to talk more about this. I'll have the link there in the description. And he closes there by saying the question is, which world would you rather live in? One where humans or Satan or chance govern what happens to you? Or one where an infinitely good, infinitely wise, infinitely powerful God works everything together for the good of those who trust him for his glory? Now, that's the world that my wife and I live in. We are trying to have a baby. I almost can't believe I'm saying that. I am buying in slowly, becoming more and more comfortable with this. If God wants married couples to have children, he decides if they will or won't and calls children a blessing. If he does give them, then we're going to try to have a baby. If he permits it to happen, we will believe this is the exact time in history that my wife has been waiting for. Hello, James Jensen. Age gap. Yeah, that's a consideration. We talked about earlier here in this about the paternal age risks on the baby, the maternal age. Those are things that are somewhat unknown, but there is some evidence that the older the man is, the more likelihood something is going to happen, like birth defects or miscarriage and things like that. Certainly with the age of the woman. Now my wife is still only 29. I'm 57 today, so I'm more concerned about the paternal issues, but certainly cannot keep putting this off, or my wife will end up getting in that higher risk category. Does the husband have the physical strength and stamina to keep up with a toddler? Well, the first thing I think about there is in the biblical days, people lived to be, 90, 100, 110, 120 years old, and they had many children, and they usually all lived together. So I don't know, at some point they kept up, but as far as having the physical stamina, um, are you referring, James, to going out and throwing the ball in the yard, or taking them here, doing things with them? Because that is a concern. I mean, if the guy is in a condition, whether it's his age or just his health, that he can't do that, then he would have to find some other way for that to happen. Maybe there's, I don't know, Boy Scouts, or there's clubs or sports, or whatever the child could get involved with. Well, you're talking about a toddler. Just how much stamina would he have to have? I don't know. I assume in my case, I'm going to let my wife deal with all of that. She has the stamina. We have decided, I didn't talk about this, but we have decided that she would be staying home with the baby. So she would be, bearing quite a bit of that. And I would have to continue to work, 6 days a week. I might have to work till I'm 70. I don't know. But yeah, the stamina issue, would just have to wait and see. If he's 75 and decrepit, that's one thing. But I'm not in the greatest of health, but I think I could keep up. It just depends what you mean by keeping up. Our retirement plan. This is the thing here. I tend to get further out in front of things than I should. And so I start thinking about, well, but we were thinking of retiring in the Philippines. Well, what about if we have a baby? Are we going to take that baby and raise him in the Philippines? Before a couple of weeks ago, we both thought, well, if we have a child, we'll stay in America. Well, now I'm kind of more open to, if they're 4, 5, 6 years old and I retire, maybe we can pack up and move to the Philippines. We are building a house there. It's really coming along. I've got another video I need to put out on where we are with that. It could change our plans. We might say, no, we're going to raise them here. But it's always a theoretical option to take them to the Philippines. But then what are they going to do for a living? Maybe I shouldn't worry about that. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, James, I appreciate you reminding me of that. To travel, meaning to the Philippines or to go to different places, that would be nice. My wife and I could go to the Philippines and we can see other places in the world. Having a child is gonna, hate to say throw a monkey wrench into that, but maybe that's not God's plan that we go and do that anymore. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I just have to try to trust more and not try to get too far ahead of myself. Um, and James mentions just shopping can be a workout with a toddler. I wouldn't know from experience, James, but I imagine it could be. This is why I am glad that my wife is relatively young. She's 29 still. Believe me, she works 50, 60 hours a week. She mows the grass. She does the cooking and the shopping. What am I doing? Well, I'm working 6 days a week too. So I'm not like doing nothing. But she would have all that stamina. She's got her car. She would have all that stamina to organize the house, to do the things that she needs to do with the toddler. Being from the Philippines, she's the oldest daughter. She's got nieces and nephews. So actually, she's probably got quite a bit of experience dealing with an infant and a toddler and different ages. So I think she could handle a workout. She's very energetic. If she's home all day with a child, when you come home from work, don't just hit the sofa and grab the remote. Big trouble. Wow, James, that's true. Because I do expect, and I don't, sometimes I wonder if she feels differently, but I would expect that when she's home with this child, anything could happen. And she has to be prepared for anything, running to the doctor, cleaning up messes, I don't know, emergencies, watching where they're going. I would anticipate that her nerves would be frayed some days and she would be exhausted. And yeah, when I come home, you're right, James, it would be a very unwise thing to come home, get something to drink, grab the remote, and talk about my day and how tired I was. That's a good point. I would not want to do that. Yeah, that's see, that's I appreciate this, James. You're suggesting to hang out with a few couples who have small children. Now, my wife might not need that, but I definitely would. Since I was single for 30, well, alone for 30 years, I wanted nothing to do with children. Usually, if you're with children, you were with their parents. They were married, you were not. That was depressing. There were times I would get asked over, which was nice, Thanksgiving or something like that. But then, sometimes I wondered, are they asking me over there out of pity or what? But I'd see their family environment and it made me feel like getting punched, like I got punched in the stomach. It didn't have the intended effect to be there because I actually felt lonelier. However, James, now that I've been married for 3 years and 5 months, that's one of the better suggestions I have heard in a while. Hang out with a few couples who have small children, and that would help us because if we have children, it would be nice to have some kind of gradual getting used to what it's like to be around the children. I admit I know I know very little about children. I haven't had to know. I haven't really wanted to know. Sure enough, if we have children, I'm going to have to know certain things. yeah, spend time in their homes, public places, just be aware of what's happening with other people. It's like when whenever I bought a new car, or I used to lease a new car every 3 years, I'd pick a color, and all of a sudden I drive that car around, and I would notice for the first time that other people had a same color car. Then I get another color 3 years later, and I'd see other cars with that color that I never noticed before. So if I was to open my eyes and go out and observe what's happening, I think that would be an eye-opening experience, because I need to put myself in their shoes and say, hey, this could be me one of these days. And I could doesn't hurt now while I'm while we're childless to be prepared, and helping other people with their children too. I know at the church we've been asked to do the nursery, which we haven't done yet. Maybe I need to bring that up again, but that's also a way, James, that we could get some exposure with children. At least me. I don't think my wife needs that so much. You love children, but know plenty who don't. Well, where I'm at, James, I just don't know enough about children. I know they're cute. I know they're a handful. I know you have to teach them and train them, because they come into the world knowing absolutely nothing. And if you leave them to themselves, um, they're gonna ruin your life, just like the wrong woman could ruin your life. And so I need to see them the way God sees them, which is as a blessing. Like I said in the video, I'm selfish. I'm 57. I would rather kind of go into retirement a little more comfortably, but I'm the one that made a choice to propose to a younger Filipina, like a lot of men are thinking of doing. Just have to be aware, these women, if they haven't had children yet, almost 100% chance are going to want to have one. And if that's not within your plans, you just have to let her know you can't have children, you had a vasectomy, or you're unable to, or you just, you don't want to, or so on. Just be honest with her. And I would like to think, James, that there could come a time when I could love children too. Everybody tells me once you have children, your whole perspective will change. I'll just have to take their word for that. I do want to give my wife a baby for the reasons I said, because she wants one. She could have somebody to take care of her, as she has been dutifully taking care of her parents. Um, I know how my wife is. I would love to have her have somebody of her own to help take care of her when she is older. In James' opinion, wrong for the foreign husband to not let his young wife have a baby. Um, I would agree with you, James. I mean, if they're at the point where, I mean, they're not married yet, maybe they're engaged, and 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 they've been maybe around each other, have a relationship of 2 or 3 years. By that point, something as serious as having a baby with this young woman, and that desire is probably going to get stronger every year. If he puts his foot down and forbids it and says, I can be your husband, but you cannot have any children, um, even though maybe she could, but he wants to prevent that. Um, yeah, I think that would be wrong too, James. A woman has this strong maternal instinct. As I said, in the older biblical days, it was a shameful thing to a woman that was barren, that did not have lots of children. She was mocked and made fun of. And that certainly is not the case today. If the husband thinks he can just observe, it doesn't work that way. Well, yeah, if he's If he's, let's say, as you said earlier, he's too old to keep up with the toddler, and he's just going to sit back in his lazy boy recliner and observe his wife doing all the work and the training of the child. Yeah, I can see that not working either. Even if the man is, I don't know, crippled or just can't get around much, he has got to have his hands, so to speak, on that child. He has to find a way to influence that child. He may be in a wheelchair, confined to a wheelchair, but, you know, in my case, I'm not going to be there most of the time because I need to work. So when I get home, I've already thought of this. When I come home, there's going to be work that needs to be done. My wife's going to be tired. I'm going to have to do things that probably she normally would, but she needs a break. Dishes, cleaning up, maybe another trip to the store or whatever for an emergency. I'm going to have to do that. This younger wife that's got so much energy, she might be more exhausted than she would be normally, and not be as interested in sex, as she might normally. So if I want that, men typically being stronger, hopefully would be able to have the energy to pick up some of the slack so that they don't completely uh, drain their young wife doing all the work with the children. And he definitely, it's his child too, and he's got to have a role in shaping that child as well. You don't think babies and toddlers mix with movies and dining? I've seen quite a few on airplanes, that don't mix with airplanes. And man, some of the loudest criers are on airplanes. And sometimes, well, I think that's because of the pressure of the airplane. But yeah, that can be a bad. Chuck E. Cheese and parks are your new hangouts. Well, I've been to Chuck E. Cheese, and probably about 20 years ago for some reason, and my ears are still ringing from that experience. I would be happy never to see a Chuck E. Cheese again as long as I live. Parks, that sounds like a good idea. I'll tell you what, James, I just like I rely on my wife to get us through the airports and get around the Philippines on those 8 flights we have to make just to get there and back. I'm going to be relying on her so much with this if we have a child. If we do, I'm going to have to rely on her, her motherly instincts and her common sense. Older guys ready to stay home more? Well, yes. In general, whether they have children or not, an older man maybe is more likely to say, well, all my friends are married or whatever. I want to stay home with this woman that I married, that I don't deserve and never thought I could get. And so I'm okay to stay home. My drinking, a person can say my drinking days are over, my partying days are over. Uh, my friends are all married. Like Hank Williams Jr. says, all my rowdy friends have settled down. So I actually saw him in concert once, probably 1982 or three, and it was a pretty good show. I was a country music DJ, so I had to go see him. Um, yeah, older guys, if they are ready to stay home more, they're going to spend more time with those children. The wife will appreciate that. Now, what I just thought of was often in the Philippines, what happens is a wife may or a mother might go and work in another country, and the children are raised by other relatives. Now, even if we had 20 relatives here, I, I would still want my wife to be the one that's at home influencing that child in the way that we think they need to be influenced. So, yeah, your point there is another advantage for an older man and a younger woman. Younger woman wants a man that's more mature, settled. He's learned from his life experience what matters the most. And at that point, I would like to think that investing his life into this child along with his wife would be something very, very important to him. And so that very well could be. Mature attitude is a plus. That's one of the attractions, everybody, that a younger Filipina can have to a foreigner. Um, I remember when I joined Christian Filipina, and that's where I found my wife, I asked the same question everybody asks. Why is it that these women in the Philippines aren't marrying men in the Philippines, like their own age, for example? And the no nonsense answer I got was because too many of them are not serious, they're unfaithful, they have bad habits. So they figure that an older foreigner is going to be more serious, and hopefully he's not one to to have a drinking habit. I think a lot of the expats in the Philippines are that way. That's not going to appeal to a Filipina. A mature older man is very desirable for a Filipina. Um, Sometimes I wonder why my wife and I make a good couple. She is 29. I turned 57 today, but she's my best friend, and my wife is more mature than I think than a lot of women her age. And in her case, that kind of makes us a little bit more of the same. She wasn't a young, immature, silly, airheaded, Filipina that I married. So she doesn't want some guy that doesn't know what he wants in life, that isn't somewhat established in life and have direction in his life. She wants an older, more mature, and settled man. Younger guys have job and social life. Kids maybe get some attention, but some guys spend no time with their kids. And well, it kind of reminds me of growing up. My dad was an alcoholic. I'm sure he would have wanted to spend time with my sister and I, but he just couldn't. Um, it was, well, I could say it wasn't his choice, but you know, part of it was his choice. But that's having an addiction. Um, just not wanting to be with the kids, and wanting to live like you're still single. Those are some habits that need to change. And here's the thing, James, when you get married, all of a sudden, you're not the center of your own universe anymore. Your wife becomes, she needs a certain amount of attention. Now you throw children into the mix, even one child, and the poor guy feels like, well, what about me? I've got to spend all this time making money, working and maybe doing something I don't want to do, and I have all these bad days. Now I don't get the peace of my wife like I used to. Now we've got all this attention on the children, and it can kind of make the guy feel like he's not as important. But actually, it would be wrong to look at it that way, because what it is he's just sacrificing more of himself for the family. Excuse me, for the wife and for the children, and he should realize that once he gets married, he marries a Filipina, she's going to want to have children. If you don't want to do that, tell her, move on. If you do and you have children, become a family man. Learn what it means to become a family man. Spend time with her. And by the way, a woman really finds a man who is good with children, very, very sexy, very attractive. If a man, you know, uh, puts energy and time into a child, a woman finds that very appealing. Yeah. Don't get too upset with people. Public think you're the grandfather. Well, that's why my hair is the color it is, because I mean, if I did not color my hair, you could put me side by side, a foreigner in the Philippines, and you probably could not tell which one was which. So by treating my hair, which I did before, you know, I met my wife, so now you know the secret. Hopefully, people won't be thinking that I am her grandfather. You know, in reality, 28-year age difference, 27-year age difference that we have most of the time, that's probably 0.5% of people in this country. Yet, you know, many foreigners with a younger Filipina don't even think about it. You know, when it works, and it works well. But grandfather, huh? I don't even want to get that senior discount when it comes my way. Yeah, online Pentecostal Deliverance Church of Christ. What's up? Yes, also your marriage to God can take over. Um, and you might need to explain that. Can also take us over. Oh, marriage to God. Well, marriage is God's idea, and you know the Bible says a lot about how to raise children too, and those are things I'm going to have to would have to start paying attention to if we have a baby. Babysitter, there you go. Yeah, especially on Friday and Saturdays. See, I'm glad you guys are making these comments. I haven't even thought about getting a babysitter. I'm just, I don't know, I want to say worried about having children. Yeah, it'd be stressful, you know, but I can't just say, well, I think I'm uncomfortable being a father, so we're just not going to do it. You know, am I that unconfident in my ability to be a good father? Well, I hope I have more confidence than that, but we need to keep our eyes open for some potential babysitters. In fact, my wife has already babysat a a Filipina and American couple. They've got 3 kids, probably 3 or 4 times. Isa has babysat for them. So I think they could return the favor. So we might have identified some prospects right there. The delivery room will be an experience. James Jensen, well, I'm probably going to have to get that on film because I'm the type of guy that would probably pass out if I saw too much of that delivery room experience. I get lightheaded pretty easy. I can't even take my own pulse. Just the thought of that, makes me lightheaded. But yeah, that would be an unforgettable experience. People tell me that, Bob, if you ever become a parent, your views will change, you know, completely. And when you see that baby's face and you see your face, you see your wife's face, the two have become one. You know, yeah, I suppose that that would be an incredible experience. You know, Terry, James, glad you're here. Yeah, when you see you and your wife's that'd be something else. You know, maybe one day, we'll see that. So just I want to kind of catch up now on the latest test results. I mentioned 9 million per mil, which you need about 20 million per mil to have a good chance. You need millions of sperm to have one actually get there and be motile enough and have the right shape, the right morphology. Well, I was so excited by that 9 million per mil that I decided to get another sperm test done just a month later, which was 2 or 3 days ago. And I got the envelope, I think it was yesterday, and I was really nervous about it. So my wife and I got in bed, and we kind of went over the surprisingly good results and what all those categories meant. And I said, okay, hon, here is the most recent one. I've been taking all these antioxidants, which I'll run down, and here's I'll bet we're even better now. So we took a look, slowly letting down the paper to, to see how good it was. And it was a total disaster. Absolutely no sperm this time. So 4 weeks after 9 million per mil, which the fertility doctor said gave us a single digit chance for pregnancy right away because there were not many, but enough active ones. In his opinion, when my wife asked him, could I get pregnant here with this? And he said, yes, single digit chance. So I thought, wow, everything's going in the right direction. Unbelievable. So we tested it 4 weeks later, and I dropped down to 0 sperm. I am going to have to do some research somehow and find out, since I'm not going to see him till December, how in the world that happens. That's happened 3 times to me, twice with very low numbers, down to nothing. Now, 9 million per mil down to nothing. When did that happen? How did it happen? Is it going to rebound? But I'll tell you what, it was a big downer because, you know, I don't know. It's like looking behind, choosing door number 2 and getting the dud prize or something. I thought we were going to get a good reading, and we're back to ground zero here. We'll just keep trying. That's for sure. Twins run in her or your family? Good question, James. And the answer is I am a twin. We know very little about my family, to be honest with you. They fled from their lives, for their lives, from Latvia back in the late 40s, maybe early 50s. Came here to some in Australia, some United States. And I don't know hardly anything about our family. I am a twin. My twin sister, I'm 10 minutes older. She died like 5 years ago. She would have loved Isa. She told me, you're going to marry a Filipina someday. I told her to stop talking nonsense because how in the world was that going to happen? Quit dreaming, quit being unrealistic. Well, she was right. I ended up marrying a Filipina. And, Isa would love my sister, and my sister would love Isa. But I'm a twin. And to be honest with you, James, now I'm thinking sometimes, boy, I hope we don't have twins. One child is hard enough for me to get my head around that, but twins, it's possible. I don't know that my wife has any twins in her family though, but I definitely am. Yes, God is our husband. He is our creator. He is the epitome of what a husband is to be. I try to talk about those things on Love Beyond the Sea. That's this channel. The goal being to try to help men, encourage them to pursue a Filipina so they don't give up on romance, love, marriage, and then understand how Filipinas might differ from, let's say, an American woman if you're from America, and just try to have a good, committed relationship with her. That's what Love Beyond the Sea is about. Testosterone treatments would work, would have the opposite effect of what you want. More endogenous, which means from your own body, testosterone is good for producing sperm, and it's good for seminal volume. However, the exact opposite happens once you put the testosterone in your body from an outside source. That's a form of birth control because your body will stop producing the testosterone because it will sense that it doesn't need it. The body is very hard to fool, and so it's just not going to produce it because it already has enough, and then it won't produce the sperm either. Like I say, I like to follow medical stuff, but your luteinizing hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone will drop to nothing. And that's why some people have wondered about using testosterone as a form of birth control. If you're younger, it might not work, like 20s. People in their 20s seem to be, you know, indestructible. But if you're my age or so, yeah, it's going to have a it's going to have a it's going to make a negative difference as far as fertility, as far as overall health. That might be a great idea. I was talking about time. You said it takes time. The Bible says we're the bride of Christ. God can also take up all of our time. Um, well, this is the thing. If I understand you correctly, Terry, and maybe I don't, but 1 Corinthians 7 talks about, this is another very misunderstood uh, verse, like I talked about Proverbs 22:6 earlier. It's saying the single person cares about the things of the Lord, how he can devote himself to the Lord. The married person thinks of, the things that concern his spouse, and that's the way it should be. But I ultimately think the single person that Paul is talking about is the single person that is able to use all of his time for God. And that's going to be very few. I believe very few Christians have that ability, the gift of singleness, the ability to stay single your whole life without sex. It doesn't frustrate you, doesn't bother you. It's your choice. You want that. It's for the kingdom of God, very frequently for evangelism. And so, I mean, you look at most church pastors, for example, are married. You could, I've always thought, boy, these men, if they want to do the job right, should be spending 30 hours a week in sermon preparation. Then they got to do all these other things. They would be better off being single. Well, those married pastors would tell you it would be an utter disaster for them to be single because they just can't do that. What's wisest and best for them is to be married. But a person like the Apostle Paul or Jesus or maybe John the Baptist, if he was single, they can do that. I think Daniel was probably a lifelong single. And when you're married, God doesn't want to take up all of your time. He wants you to invest in your wife and your children, and that's going to take up a lot of time. And I guess that's just the way it's going to be. Yeah, Terry, a miracle. I told my wife back in May that we gave it a year and a half, 3 or 4 years ago. Now maybe I'll give it 2 years, and nothing's happening. We call off the dogs, and that's it. So now that we're back to ground zero, I'm not going to quit because I don't know why that happened. I hope it continues to get better. The med I'm taking, which we took before, it's called human chorionic gonadotropin (HCG). It's a fertility med for men and women. It probably works better for women, but a lot of men use this. They use Clomid. Clomid did not work for me. Neither did the HCG. It just didn't work. So for reasons I won't get into now, I'm going to pass on the Clomid. But we're doing what we can, and I'm eating all kinds of food. Now, I don't know the right kind of food. I don't know if it's the med, but when you got blood pressure of 176/95 like I did last week, you don't feel very good. So I've started garlic and water pills to try to knock that down. If your blood is thick and you got high blood pressure, you move and think slowly, and that's dangerous. So I'll put up with it as long as I can. But this whole thing may get short-circuited if my health doesn't work out. My blood pressure was 172. Excuse me, no, 172/102 just a couple days ago. So it normally was around 120, 130/80. Then 150s all year. It's been in the 150s. Then we hit the 160s. Now we're in the 170s. What would happen if I lost control and got angry? I'd hate to see what we're getting up to. But what I've been doing that I thought was working before these latest sperm results, I've been eating what I call fertility foods: eggs, pumpkin seeds, black seed oil, fenugreek seeds, oats, whole wheat bread, dark chocolate, bananas, orange juice, meat. A lot of antioxidants is important. I've been taking vitamin C, zinc. You need copper when you take zinc. Selenium, omega-3, pine bark extract, uh, carnitol, which is different carnitines, and ashwagandha. And these things are also supposed to help um, with fertility, but it just hasn't it hasn't happened yet. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up. Yeah, James, I appreciate you rooting for both of us. I tend to worry about things, and I'm wondering, well, what if we get right to that 2 year mark and then things start to change? I'd rather just hurry up and see if she can get pregnant. So the last point I want to talk about was God's provision. Many verses showing how the Christian need not worry about having enough to provide if they work diligently and trust God. Doesn't mean they're going to be rich, though. These will have additional meaning. This will have additional meaning to us if God gives us a baby. Since I said earlier, I insist my wife be at home to help raise a child. This means a reduction of about $30,000+ a year that she earns now, and this means needing to add the baby to the insurance plan. That will go up 33%. And, God has always provided for both of us from both sides of the world. So there's no reason to doubt that he'll continue to do that if he gives us a baby. So let me run through these here, the 10 things about this video to kind of encapsulate it. One, God says, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. We haven't done that. We're going to try to do that. Two, God controls the birth process. That's important. So we don't have to worry that we're going to end up having a baby when God says, no, 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 you fools. I didn't want you to have a baby. He controls the birth process. Went over that during the video. Three, we still have time for this before I become completely uncomfortable with the risks. Four, God can be trusted. Five, children are a blessing. And as James pointed out, I need some more experience around children to become comfortable with being around them, and just seeing my wife's nieces and nephews. That's probably excuse me, helped in some way too, for me to maybe feel a little more comfortable. Six, God controls all things. Seven, I love my wife and want her good always. Eight, God provides. Nine, I'm doing all I can with diet and supplements. 10, just bought my wife some prenatal vitamins. And so that's what I'm trying to do, to give a baby to my love beyond the sea. So she's going to be home in about 10 or 13 minutes. So if anybody has any other additional comments, be glad to answer that. I try to do these videos when my wife's not here so she doesn't feel like I'm avoiding her. And put James on your show. James has been very helpful here with his comments. I appreciate both your comments. Kind of miss Phil's to Phoenix here tonight. He maybe hopefully he'll watch it. He's married to a Filipina, lives in Phoenix, and I like his channel. I like his philosophy and his attitude. And I mentioned last week a guy. His channel is called All About the Philippines. He's in Australia, happily married to a Filipina. So I'm happily married to a Filipina, but part of that deal is wanting to have a child. I'm not the most confident person in the world with that, but anytime you've never done something before, you tend not to have a lot of confidence. So James had some good advice, and definitely I need to keep my eyes open for some of those observations he made. I appreciate you guys' comments. Hopefully in another month or so, I just drop in a message on a video or another live stream someday, how we're doing. Definitely want to see this count go up. The fact that it went up like it did gives me hope. The fact that it dropped like a ton of lead makes me wonder what's going on. But that's the thing, Terry. I can't honestly say, and I've told my wife this. I can't say I I want to have a child. My wife wants to have a baby. She's content if she doesn't. I'm content if we don't. But then she'll push me at night one sometime, hun, can we still have a baby? So I know that means that she still wants one. I have to I have to be in the mindset more that I'm more excited about it. Who knows? Maybe that affects sperm quality too. I suppose it might. So yeah, we're going to keep praying, Terry, and let me know if you'd like me to participate in your show again. I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you for being here. I know you guys have children. You know things I don't know about the difficulties and the joys of raising a child, and this is something I'm just started kind of thinking about because my wife wants to have a baby. A child is a long time process of great amounts of work, yeah, and commitment. This is true. And why does that scare me? Isn't life all about that? Nothing seems to come easy. So, sure, Terry, uh, live stream about the Lord, anything you want to talk about on any one of your channels. We'll just have to get in touch with that. Um, so I'm glad you're here. I think this topic applies to foreigners and Filipinas, and many of my viewers are between 35 and 44 and male. Apparently, almost all of them. So, or at least that are watching consistently. So that's one of the reasons I put this out here. Plus, I'm dealing with it myself. So appreciate that, James. As Terry said, it's long, hard work, and you guys would know. Children will change your relationship with your wife. Yeah, I'm kind of concerned about that. I've thought about, will that change my wife's relationship with me? She, yeah, you might not have sex as much. She might be more tired. There's hormonal changes that she would go through uh, when if she's pregnant. And yeah, kids keep you young as long as I'm old enough to keep up with them. I mean, energetic enough to keep up with them, James. Um, we'll see about that. I do love her nieces and nephews. We try to say hi when she does videos with them, and maybe that's designed to kind of give me a little bit of preparation. Yeah, well, I'm as jealous as anyone. I don't want to be second place to the baby, so we'll deal with that when the time comes. Um, I just have to make sure that I'm involved, very actively involved with doing the training and also the dirty work with the child. And I'm hoping that the very process of now having the great responsibility of having this child will actually help strengthen our relationship. It may be, and whenever God says, okay, your relationship is at a point where I can give you this baby now, he will. I pray that the baby is healthy. That's a concern with older paternal age, as I mentioned throughout the video. So a lot of things to potentially worry about, and I really can't be doing that. That may be part of the blood pressure deal. With my back, James, I will not be spending much time on trampoline. I've got 7 or 8 bad discs. I've had back surgery, trying to avoid a neck surgery. Uh, Trampoline would be great as long as I don't go very high or fall off, that's for sure. Responsibility, Terry, I hope that responsibility we will share together. Um, my mom pretty much had to do most of it for us because my dad's drinking. So it should be easier if we share it together, and we'll come across decisions we never thought we'd have to make before. We'll just have to take it one day at a time. Yeah, the child care issue, Glad you brought that up here. Uh, well, first of all, even if I thought that we wanted to have childcare, which I don't, here it's probably $300-400 a month per child, and we're not going to do that. I think my wife can be an excellent mother. I want her to be the one that trains up that child. The other people that would be babies, that would be the caregivers, they wouldn't know. I talked about raising your children, training them the way they should go. These people aren't going to know like we do the precise tendencies and idiosyncrasies and ways of this child that we do. They're not going to care about them like we would. So no babysitting. I'll get a second job if I have to avoid that, but I don't think that'll happen. I mean, yeah, we'll get taxed less by having a child, so that'll help defray some of her not working. And she can still find some things to do actually at home, which is another topic we won't get into, but there's some potential for her to earn some income while she is at home. But childcare, yeah, my wife knows where I stand on that. There are some things, Terry, I've said I want to defer to my wife whenever possible. I told her that before I married her, but I also told her there's sometimes that I'm just not going to be able to do that. I'm just not going to, and then she's going to have to follow along with that for the good of the relationship. But I'm going to try like crazy to defer to her. The child paying for childcare, no, we're not going to do that. I just can't allow that. Yeah, I know. Child gets older, their concerns and demands, and then cars and dating, and a lot of that I might not even be around for. As I said earlier, I want to be able to give them the best that I can until they're about 12, 13 years old. By that time, I think you pretty much have to have the foundational stuff in there, teach them how to make good decisions and right from wrong, or else you might not get them back. You might not be able to change their ways. So as soon as there's pregnancy, then we start to shift to teaching and training mode. Right now, it looks like that's not going to happen, but we're going to keep praying. I'll keep eating this way. I'll keep taking the antioxidants and the fertility med, and see how it goes. So appreciate you guys asking comments, because I know you put so much thought into a few reasons that you have to justify your position. There's always things you don't think about. Yeah, there's a lot to think about. We just have to believe that God will get us through this together. So thank you, everybody, for watching this live stream. I know it's long. You guys listen to it in pieces, or when I listen to long videos when I'm driving or doing work at home, washing the clothes, at the computer. That's how I do listen to the long ones. With the need for a car seat in the back, you'll have to forget getting the Corvette. We have a what do I have? Don't even know what I drive. It's a Honda CRV and SUV, not CRV. Maybe it is CRV SUV. I don't know. But yeah, that's we'll have to do all of that, and I just hope she can do it. Filipinas think that work is everything. Have the baby, have somebody at home raise them. Well, that's the way it might work in the Philippines. This is America. We don't live in the Philippines. I want her raising that child. She knows that. We've talked about that. The burden on earning will be on me. Just wish I had more years to do it. But, she's bright enough and clever enough. She can find possibly something to do at home. I've got some ideas. I won't share that. But it does involve, foreigners and Filipinas, and ways that she might be able to help them also with advice. Might be something that could fit into my channel. My wife won't have her family here. Yeah, there's a lot of help in the Philippines. It's a given, but I think for some reason that my wife is going to be able to focus on this child. Hopefully, she'll be able to spend time with people at church and their families, and we can go and like James talked about finding babysitters and so on, um, and she has to realize her family's not here. They're 9,200 miles away, and there's just nothing we can do about that. Yeah, I can see a Filipina wanting parents, relatives with them in that big part of their life, but they have to understand when they marry a foreigner, they're going far away. They have to understand that. They can't do it and then regret it. They have to do it knowing. In fact, the Bible says when you get married, you leave your father and your mother. That's hard to do for Filipinas because the family is so integrated into their life, even into adulthood. In this case, it's probably easier to leave. Essentially, that's talking about getting away from their influence. And I don't think that'll be a problem here. As far as her wishing they were there, the best we can do is take that child to the Philippines, once in a while, which would really be nice for them to see their relatives. And well, hopefully we'll do that someday, or we might not get the chance to. I can tell you this. So, hi, Phil's to Phoenix, about the money. I've talked to Filipinas, and my wife will probably be the same way. Yeah, you want to send money back home, but when you have your own baby, that changes everything. I've talked to a Filipina in the airport last time we went there, 2 years ago, and she said they don't send any money back home because her family is here in the States. I think it was Oklahoma, and she doesn't send any money back home. Why should she? She reasoned. Her family's here. They come first. And, what we'll do, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I believe you, she just may have to temper her expectations about how much to send back. Um, Again, we have to be realistic. If she's not working, the amount of money is not going to be the same. And frankly, I think my wife can stand up to demands from her family and say no, we can't do that, and here's why. At least that's what I'm hoping. Yeah, a child can destroy a marriage, or not being prepared for that child can destroy the marriage. And I value and treasure our marriage, and yeah, these things need to be talked about. I want to do that as much as we can, but then there's another school of thought that says don't get so far ahead of yourself that you're sweating all kinds of situations that may never even happen. And there's truth in both of those things. We have to be aware that it will change our lives, hopefully keep it so that it changes it for the better. And growing as a person, I need that. My wife needs that. We all do. And as a couple, I hope it brings us closer together, not, cause us to be apart. Sponsor one of her nieces or cousins over to help introduce her to me at the same time. Well, as far as I know, that might take a while. Mama and Papa could come over in the same amount of time, a spousal visa or fiance visa, about a year, maybe less. As far as I know, James, the other relations are 10 years. I know for her sisters or her brothers, that would be a 10-year, yes, 10-year process. And probably it would be the same for anyone else, unless you were just kidding. I don't know about that part of it. But lots of good Filipinas there, James. Just have to be real careful about who you're looking for. And my wife is the oldest daughter, Phil's to Phoenix. She's 29, and sisters are like 27, maybe 19. maybe 23. Anyway, and because of that, she's used to working and being responsible and taking care of everybody. At some point, though, I hope she wants to take care of her own, and we'll see. That may not happen. So, but we'd like it to while there's still time. So, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I hope people can take a look at this later. I know it's long, but don't watch it all at once. Just take it in pieces, hopefully, or watch parts of it and learn some of the thought process we have of why we are still continuing to try to have a child. Yeah, and if it's going to put extra pressure on my wife to support her family, that's where I need to step in and assert myself a little bit, because I want to protect my wife's sanity and her health, and be understanding, and we'll see. That's a good point. And I'm glad you guys are throwing these things out there, because I didn't have time to consider that. And those are good points. So thanks for being here. Hope you guys can, if people are watching this later, will take to heart some of these things. Maybe it'll help you with a decision. So there's been a lot to talk about. In a way, I don't want to think about it anymore. But we'll just keep doing what we can do to try to have a baby if God wills. So that's it for this live stream. And we'll see you again one of these days here on another live stream on Love Beyond the Sea.